Fantastic. So I am going to jump right in. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. And I want to make apologies for Danielle. Danny, she may be joining us, but she's on PTO today and she thought she might have internet access. And if so, she was planning to join. But if not, I know her slides and her content quite well. We work very closely together. So I am very pleased to be with you. And I just wanted to take a moment and say that I know it's been a very stressful couple of weeks for the entire region. And thank you for joining to talk about such an important topic, such as domestic violence during the pandemic. So I'm honored to be with you today. And prior to joining Facebook as their global head of women's safety last July, I worked in the nonprofit sector for the past 27 years, working to end gender-based violence at the U.S. National Network to End Domestic Violence and a few other organizations. I'm also one of the founding board members of the Global Network of Women's Shelters. So I have strong roots in the nonprofit world. I loved that work, and I am really honored now in my Facebook role to get to work with so many nonprofit and NGO experts around the world. Facebook's mission is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. And we know that is not possible if people are not safe. And that means safe online from harassment and also safe in their homes from potentially domestic violence offenders. So to build this mission, we know we have to partner with NGO experts to create a world without violence. Facebook takes a comprehensive 5-pillar approach to safety. Our first pillar is partnerships, and we partner with hundreds of organizations around the world. We know we are not the experts, and we have to work with experts not only in regions, but also experts in different topics from child safety, women's safety, LGBTQ+ safety, etc. Our second pillar of safety is policies. These are the content policies that guide the behavior on our platforms on Facebook and Instagram. That's what we call community standards. The third pillar is the tools that give people control over their experience. And that is, how do you report if you see something that's harassing or abusive? And it's also the tools and features that allow you to control what you see, who sees your comments and posts, and all of those types of minute details that are really important. Our fourth pillar is resources. We want to provide user guides at every point in the service. So if you need help, you could either use the Instagram or Facebook help centers. And then we also have the Facebook Safety Center that I'll talk about a bit later. And then feedback is our fifth pillar. It's vital that we keep getting constant feedback from our users, from experts like yourselves, about what we're doing well and what we could improve on. So I mentioned that first pillar is partnerships. We work with over 400 nonprofits around the world. About half of them specialize in women's safety. And we've also done women's safety roundtables throughout the world, and we keep doing them. We actually just did one in Australia last week. It was obviously virtual, but we're continuing to build our relationships and hear from NGOs about what we can be doing differently. So I want to briefly talk about our partnerships and our efforts to respond to COVID and domestic violence. We know that the shadow pandemic, as the World Health Organization and United Nations have referred to it, as the second pandemic on top of the coronavirus pandemic. We know that domestic violence isn't caused by health issues, but it's definitely exacerbated, especially if somebody is sort of locked down at home with an abusive and controlling partner. So what we did is first of all, we created a COVID-19 information center on Facebook. And in there, we provide lots of information about vaccinations and the virus and safety and other World Health Organization tips. But we also added domestic violence information. And we did this in partnership with United Nations Women, UN Women, and also my former organization, the National Network to End Domestic Violence. I was still working there at the beginning of the pandemic, and I actually helped create these tips along with UN Women for somebody experiencing domestic violence, and then also a family or a friend of someone. If you're worried about a friend or a loved one, how can you help, and some tips that you can do. These are some of the tips here. Have an escape plan, be prepared, talk to your kids for what you can do if you're experiencing domestic violence yourself. And then the National Network to End Domestic Violence, where I worked, also created a short version of the same tips that made them more fun and graphic and easier to comprehend. One of the things we knew is that people would be reaching out for help, and it might be challenging, especially if you were locked at home during the pandemic. You might not be able to call. So we Facebook worked very closely with the Global Network of Women's Shelters, UN Women, and my old organization to help compile as many helplines as possible. And whenever we hear that there's an error, we update this. These are linked in the COVID information hub on Facebook. They're also at fb.com/safety/domestic violence resources. And then in addition, a team of engineers and designers that work at Facebook answered the call of the global network. The GNWS had been trying to build a comprehensive directory for many years. And the goal of this is that each local NGO or national helpline owns their own records. So they submit their details, including if they offer chat services, what hours they offer chat, their logo if they'd like, a description, and then also what languages they provide help in. And then a network, either the global network or a continental network or a national network, quickly reviews that and says, yes, we know this organization, they provide trustworthy support, to make sure that we don't accidentally list abuser sort of organizations. So we want to make sure we're offering gender-based violence expert resources. And so Lila Not Help was quietly announced in March so that NGOs can start entering their information. It's at lila.help. We'd love to have all of the organizations in Israel submit their details. And then we're hoping to publicly announce it at the end of June during the UN Women Generation Equality Forum. And so it's not publicly, if you try to search for it on Google yet, you won't find it because we've intentionally kept it quiet until it's filled. We want a full directory before we talk about it publicly. And this was a pro bono project from Facebook staff, and then also in partnership with the Global Network of Women's Shelters, and UN Women provided some funding. So I want to talk about a couple of the things that we've done in more detail. So we'll have plenty of time for questions if you have any about this. One of the things that we realized in Brazil is people were looking for information, and sometimes it didn't need to tie up a helpline. So if it wasn't a situation where we had many different counselors and victims, it might be that it's a best friend wanting to find out what resources are available in this region of Brazil. And so we created the ISABot, and the purpose of it is, it's a chat bot, is you can ask questions and get information and details about what help is available without actually having to tie up a phone line. It does not replace the phone line. It does not replace those trained counselors that are doing interactive either chat support or phone support, but it complements it. And it can take some of the pressure off the trained counselors. If somebody needs to know the hours that someone is open, or where their public outreach office is located, those types of things, the chat bot can provide some of those details. It also can provide details about safety planning and other tips, but we're very, very clear that this does not replace a trained expert women's NGO, that's vital. Those services are very much needed around the world, but chat bots and other types of technology can supplement them. And then one thing that we did throughout Latin America in Spanish is we knew that people wanted to help, but were also very concerned about how to reach out in a safe way. The last thing you want to do, and we all know this from doing this work, is ask someone directly about if they're experiencing domestic violence, if their abusive partner might be in earshot, if they can hear what's happening. And so being subtle about it. And one of the things that we did with this campaign in Latin America is focusing on staying connected and staying in touch. And the thing we really highlighted is letting the survivor choose how they want to connect, how they want to stay in touch, that it's very important that the survivor choose that. It's much safer than if we make an assumption. And so this is hashtag stay connected is the campaign, and there's all of these fun little videos. And one thing that we were assuming, and we don't have an easy way to test this, is that abusive partners might let their victim use Facebook, but might not let their victim use other technology services. So we wanted to hide really vital life-saving information as subtly as possible throughout Facebook and make it easy to find. And then one other thing that we did is we did a WhatsApp channel. It was 24/7, and it was to allow people to reach out and ask for help using chat and not have to talk, so that they didn't have family overhearing perhaps during the lockdowns. And we did this partnership in Brazil. And in the first 10 days that we had this channel live on WhatsApp, or Brazil had it, there were over 7,000 messages, and this was in October of 2020 when it launched. And so we know that it was, very, very needed and used heavily at the very beginning. So these are just some of the things that we partnered with our nonprofit partners during COVID to develop. Facebook didn't create any of these alone. They were all developed with our NGO and nonprofit partners, and we rely on them. We're the technology back end, but the NGOs and the nonprofits, they're the experts in this content. So I have plenty of time for questions. If you have questions, I believe you can send them in. And I just want to take a moment and thank you for your work. This work is so important, and supporting survivors of abuse is such vital work. And I think I will see your questions come in the chat box. So I'm just waiting in case you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to share.
Well, we cannot see now the questions from our audience, but I have a question. I would like to know how those women from Brazil asked for help, and how could you help them? Did you reach the authorities in Brazil, or?
Exactly. It was a partnership with the Ministry of Women. We also did a similar chatbot in Chile and one in Argentina, and all of those were with the ministers. We partnered with the government-funded helplines, but in other countries where we're working on chatbots, like we're doing one messenger bot in Vietnam, and we're partnering with a consortium of women's safety NGOs, domestic violence experts around the country. And the way they'll find out about the messenger bot is through that network of NGOs and their Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all of their social media accounts.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Cindy. Thank you for coming to our webinar. And I hope I guess that if there were other questions, they can reach you on our Facebook group.
That would be fantastic. I would love that.
Thank you very much.
Oh, here's a question. Have we seen the impact in real life following these steps? How do you raise awareness to these new services? One thing that we've been trying to track internally is how often these resources are accessed, but there's some external research that the United Nations did in Asia during the pandemic that is fantastic. I think I can find the link and put it in the chat box, but they measured, the United Nations did a study on big data and domestic violence during the pandemic. And what they did is they looked at Google search terms, which are public, and they saw in 6 countries throughout Asia the number of times people asked for information about domestic violence, and they used local languages, like, what can I do if I'm being hit? Where is a shelter? And they used all sorts of local terms in different languages, and they noticed a significant increase in how many times people were using Google to search for help during the pandemic. Then they also went and looked at the nonprofits in those same 6 countries and noticed that the NGOs had also significantly increased their digital presence. They were offering chat services, chat bots, reaching out, doing outreach on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, other social media. And so I was thrilled to see this UN report, because it showed what we anecdotally knew, is that people were relying on technology when they couldn't meet in person. And then another question is, do I have any experience on our projects? And what I would say is that projects have to partner with civil society, that if a minister tried to do, a Ministry of Women tried to develop a WhatsApp chatbot with Facebook and WhatsApp and did not include those civil society experts, we might miss something. That NGOs play a vital role. And even if they're only in an advisory capacity, for consultation, how important it is to bring those NGO experts into the conversation when ministers and others work on vital things like chatbots or WhatsApp APIs for reaching out for help.